They are practicing law. That is not Sharia. Sharia means if you want to eat during the day, you're free to do so. And not only you are free to do so, you must make sure that nobody imposes the will upon him and forces him to stop him from eating. He's got a right to eat if he wants to. Just as you have got a right to fast if you want to. And your government has to make sure that everybody is free to do as he wishes. And that you have a system in place so that if he feels his rights are violated, he can go there and his rights will be protected, and his rights will be preserved, and his rights will be given due. Let us go through the other points, which will illustrate in detail, a little bit more detail, what I'm saying. The objectives of this system is to set us free. The system of law is to make us subservient so that every aspect of our life is regulated. The practice of the prophets is to ensure that every aspect of our life we are free to do as we please, as long as we don't violate the rights of anyone else. Do we see the difference? Can we begin to understand why there are people that are so hateful of this practice? Because it takes away their power. This is the reason why governments which appear to be so totally different, such as the kleptocracy in the United States, the autocracy in Arabia, the so-called democracy in Egypt, the theocracy in Iran, the communism in China, though they are all so different, they all come together and are all at one in preventing the development within their societies of the practice of Sharia. Because when that happens, the control that they exercise over the people will be destroyed. When the last prophet came and he sent his messengers out to the leaders, his objective was not to remove them from power, and he made it very clear. We are not here to depose you or to remove you of your power. We are here to bring justice. We are here to ensure that everybody is free to live their life the way they want to. We are giving you this message. Rule your people if they want you as their ruler, but rule in terms of God's law. In other words, preserve and protect the right of the individuals to live the way they want to. And if you agree to do this, you may continue to be the leader if you are the person your people want as their leader. But if you are going to resist, and if you're going to insist of imposing your views on your people and subjecting them to your whims and your fancies, then we are obliged to replace you with somebody who will protect the freedom of their people. And that was his message. That was the message that God had given his prophet to bring across to the world. This is the kind of world that the prophets wanted to create. And we as God's representatives of earth have a duty of creating that world of freedom. And that is why this practice is hated so much, and this is why the people who want to hold on to power and to impose their views on others see this as a form of the worst kind. They call it terrorists and all kinds of names, but who are they a threat to? Only the despots and the dictators, only to the people that don't want people to be free. Okay, under law there is no protection of our privacy. Even though they pay lip service to privacy, privacy does not exist. One agent of the state, the policeman, under the authority of another agent of the state, the magistrate, can use that authority, which is a warrant, and enter anybody's property, search anybody's property, and we can't do anything. We can do nothing about it. There is no privacy. In terms of Sharia, in terms of the practice of the prophets, in terms of what God intends for us, nobody can enter your property without your permission. I go into details in the book. Believe me, it is true. Not even a policeman can step foot in your property if you don't give him permission. Because our rights, our freedoms are given by God, and no human being has the authority, has the power, has the legitimacy to take it away from us. So if we are living under a system that protects our freedom, protects our free will, if we live under a system that God has presented as the ideal model for us, our rights are protected, our rights are sanctified, and we are the ones that protect our rights. And this is an important aspect. Under the practice of the prophets, we are the ones who protect our own rights, not somebody else. Under the law, we are forced to relinquish the protection of our rights and put it in the hands of someone else. And remember, when we place the protection of our rights and our freedom in the hands of someone else, we actually surrender our rights, we surrender our freedom. The only person that can protect our rights is ourselves. And under the practice of the prophets, we are obliged to protect our rights. This is our duty. We are obliged to defend ourselves. We are obliged to be armed, because that is our duty. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We must do it for ourselves. But the law says you've got no right to protect yourself. You must surrender it to government. That's a very big difference. In addition to taking away our privacy under law, the law interferes in our private lives and dictates what we do in our private lives. No longer is the father the head of the family. The head of the family is now the state president. We may not even punish our children in the way that we deem appropriate. Even if where God tells us that if we spare the rod, we spoil the child, the law says, no, you have to spare the rod. Who do we obey? Do we obey God? Or do we obey this false God that forces us to obey its laws? Remember, we worship the one whose laws we follow. If we obey the laws of God, if we follow the teachings of God, it is God we follow. If we follow the teachings of this body, if we follow its laws, this is who we worship. And if this is who we worship, we cannot expect to be, we cannot expect our actions to be sanctified by God. We will not qualify for paradise. Our objective on earth is futility. We don't achieve anything. Under the practice of the prophets, there is true ownership. I own what is mine, truly own it. Under law, we don't own anything. Everything belongs to this government. Even the property that we so-called own, what we have actually acquired when we pay that money and receive that paper, that deed, is the permission to occupy that property. But we don't own it. It belongs to the government. And proof of that is the fact that we pay a rental every month. They call it rates. It's a rental. And that rental will go up every time we increase the value of the property. Just like any rental. Even though we put our money in improving the property, its value increases, so the value of the government's property increases, we pay more rental, which is more rates. There is no ownership under law. Everything belongs to the government. It can be confiscated, it can be taken, we can be thrown out. We have no say. Under the practice of the prophets, we truly own it. It is the worst form of insult that we have to pay taxes on the property in which we live. This is our right, to have a roof over our head, to have a land to live on. Under Sharia, under the practice of the prophets, nobody pays any taxes whatsoever in the land and the home in which they live. It's freehold. You do not need anybody's permission, and you don't have to pay any tax to anybody for something which is your right, the right to live. Under the system of law, we can be thrown out of our homes because of our failure to pay taxes. In other words, we have no right to have a roof over our home, our head, and the land on which to live. No right. It is a privilege which we get by paying our rental every month, and that is no right. Under the practice of the prophets, we have a right, no taxes on the property in which we live. Laws are rigid and inflexible. It's laid down, you have to follow it, right or wrong. Whereas under the practice of the prophets, there's guidance and we are advised to follow it, but we are expected to exercise our common sense. Let's take a simple example. Most of us, most people having the technology to watch this on your computer are familiar with traffic lights. When the light is red, we are expected to stop, and it's green, we are expected to go. If you come to a traffic light at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's no traffic anywhere, under the law you have to stop. But under the practice of the prophets, you will come there, you will assess the situation, there's no vehicles, and you will proceed. Why? Because traffic lights are meant to regulate traffic, not regulate people. And if there is no traffic, the lights become superfluous, they're irrelevant. So at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's no traffic, that traffic light is irrelevant. But if you go through a red light under law, you've committed a crime, they can be thrown in prison. So laws are rigid and inflexible. The practice of the prophets is guidance, which we are expected to use our common sense and apply as is applicable. Under law, we have no inherent rights. I even told you we've got no right to our own home. We don't even have rights to ourselves. Under the law, we are given certain privileges. And for most of those privileges, we have to pay for them. And these privileges usually come with a license. So there's a license for basically everything. And you pay for the license and then you're allowed to use it. Even though you own the car, you can't use it on the road unless you've got the permission to use it, and that permission comes with the license. So we have no inherent rights under law, but under the practice of the prophets, we have all these inherent rights by God, and these rights are preserved because no one is competent to take them away. There is no one competent to take it away. God has given it to us, and it's ours. And we are the ones who defend it. Nobody can take it from us. That's the difference. We belong to the government. The government owns us under law. Under Sharia, we are free. We are created by God, but God has set us free. And we can choose to voluntarily submit ourselves to God if we choose. Under law, we belong to the government. This comes out in criminal cases. If there's a murder, for example, you will always find that the state is a litigant. Why? Because the state has incurred the loss. Its property has been killed. And so now you have to answer to the state for destroying its property. But under Sharia, the person who is affected is the litigant. And under Sharia, under the practice of the prophets, the purpose of the court is to uphold the rights of the person whose right has been violated. So for example, if my relative was killed, I will then decide whether I expect this person to die or I accept his proposal of whatever he is paying as compensation. And the court will ensure that the person who had promised to pay this amount will actually make the payment. The court becomes an extension of myself. Under the state, no such thing happens. The fact that I have incurred the loss is irrelevant. The person who has committed the crime will be answerable to the state and will pay to the state. That's the big difference. It will never happen under Sharia. A person being set free because I agree to the money that he's going to pay me never happens under the law. The law criminalizes normal daily activities. If you go above a certain speed, it's a crime. If you sell petrol after a certain time, it's a crime. If you do certain things, it's a crime. If you sell petrol above a certain amount, it's a crime. Normal activities, normal business activities, normal living activities become a crime. This never happens under the practice of the prophets. You are free to practice your life. If your customer wants to pay your price, he'll pay it. If he doesn't want to pay it, that's his business. This will never happen under the law. The law is applied selectively so that it targets certain people who it wants to punish and it relieves other people. The law is applied randomly so that sometimes you have a police checking how fast you're driving and others they don't. And when this happens, when there is random application of the law, we tend to forget, and this increases the likelihood of us actually falling foul and ending up having to pay a ticket. So the law is applied in a way that generates more income for itself.